I'm Marilyn Reynolds. I'm the author of 11 books in the True to Life from Hamilton High realistic fiction series, and also a book, I Won't Read and You Can't Make Me, Reaching Reluctant Teen Readers, which is based on my experience as a teacher. Two books that are unrelated to that, Over 70, and I Don't Mean Miles Per Hour, and Till Death or Dementia Do Us Part. And my most recent Hamilton High book, which just came out a couple of months ago, is Eddie's Choice. And how I got started writing is pretty much how everything has gone in my life. It was accidentally. I was interested in creative writing when I was in college, but I had two little girls, 3.5 and 2, and trying to make a living as a writer didn't seem to be very practical. I needed benefits and a steady income. And for a long time, I only wrote pretty much notes to the kids, take the clothes out of the dryer, or shopping lists. But I took a creative writing class when I was on a sabbatical, and I'd completed work for a master's in reading education, and I had a little time left. And I thought, well, I used to like that. So I took this class, and one of the assignments one day was to write something from your childhood. And I just wrote a story that came to me. I just remembered every piece of it. And it was about the time when I was 6 years old, and after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and then the internment of a Japanese family that had the produce department where my father had a meat market. And it was a very difficult and trying time. When I went into the market, the produce bins were covered with canvas, and I'd enjoyed that family. I couldn't understand anything the parents said, but the boys, I think there were 4 of them, would chase me around and give me string beans, and then they were gone. And I asked my mother where they'd gone, and she said, well, they'd gone to camp. I thought that sounded like fun. We went to visit them one day, and I wanted to take my bathing suit, and my mother said, no, it's not that kind of camp. So they were at the racetrack, at Santa Anita Racetrack, living in stables or under tents. And so I just wrote about that. And the instructor suggested I send it off to the Los Angeles Times. So I did, not knowing that the Los Angeles Times got over 200 submissions every week for op-ed pieces, but they took it. And then a month or so later, a check showed up in the mail, and my name was in print, and I got a number of responses to that, both from Japanese people who'd had those experiences and from people who had witnessed and helped them. And I thought, I really like this. And if the Los Angeles Times thinks I'm a writer, well, I'm a writer. And so for the next few years, I wrote op-ed pieces, getting maybe 1 out of 4 or 5 published. But in the Chicago Tribune and San Francisco Chronicle and Los Angeles Times, Pasadena Star News. And I was doing just fine. I liked that. But I didn't like my publication rate. And so I took a class, Writing for Publication, and it was taught by a woman who wrote young adult books. And at the same time, I was teaching English and reading to a number of I hate to read kids. And they wanted to read something that reflected life as they knew it. And although there's plenty of that out there now, there wasn't then. Once they'd read The Outsiders, Go Ask Alice, if anyone remembers that, a drug story, maybe a Judy Blume, I was stuck with what to give them. And this teacher kept saying, you should try YA. You've got a lot of material. And my first thought was, I work with them all day. I don't want to write about them at night. But she had planted a seed, and I thought, well, I'll try it. And so the first book I wrote was it's the story of a girl who's being molested by a neighbor. And I was sending it out and getting it back and sending it out and getting it back, but the kids were reading it. I'd brought it in a notebook. And actually, I didn't have enough notebooks to go around to everyone, and kids would line up at the door after lunch to try to get in there first to get a notebook. These were not kids who woke up at first thing in the morning and thought, what can I do to make my teacher feel good today? I knew they were really liking that book and connecting with the book. And one girl who had never read a book and who didn't really like to read, English wasn't her first language, she probably read on about a third grade level, just plowed through it day by day by day. And when she wrote her book reflection, she said, something like this happened to me once and I've never told anyone. And so I was able to help her get to someone who I trusted and who I knew would do a nice job with her. And she'd been very withdrawn before. It helped her kind of come out of her shell. It turned her into a reader. And I thought, so if this book can do this for one person, I want it to get out there. And it was rejected 23 times before it was finally published. And the reason I wrote Telling was that I didn't have anything on my shelves that addressed that issue, which I knew was a big issue. And then another book I didn't have on my shelves was a book that with a subject of teen pregnancy. I mean, this is the short version. I think they're really character driven, but they're characters who have come up against these situations. And so I wrote Detour for Emmy, which won the South Carolina Best Book for Young Adults Award the year after it came out, which was very reassuring. While I was writing that, boys in my classroom said, well, everybody writes about teen moms, which wasn't exactly the case then, but that's what they said. And you should write about teen dads. And my first response was, you want a book about teen dads, you write it. I was hesitant to write from a male point of view. We've all read books by men from female points of view, and some of them are great, and some of them just so miss the mark. And I didn't ever want to write a phony book. But they pestered me, and my publisher said they would really like that, and so I decided to take it on. And I visited boys in a comprehensive high school so I could get a large classroom of boys to just get some of their opinions about what they thought, how they thought they might behave. And one of them, who hadn't told anyone before, was a teen dad. And I just tried to do as much as I could to vet it. And I think I got it right. I get some touching letters and emails about that. And that was later made into an after-school special, which was fun and terrible, both at the same time. I'm not a script writer. I had a script writing partner, and we are amazingly and luckily still friends. But it's a very different process than writing a book. But it was fun to see. So I guess that's kind of my story. Yeah, I think they are happy. And I don't mean like a happy Disney ending, but I think that all of my characters are tested and having, for one reason or another, at some point in their young lives, a difficult time. And then that's not the end of the story. The story goes on to show how they deal with that, how they, for instance, with Emmy, she was a very good student. Emmy, the girl who gets pregnant at the age of 15, she's on a college track. Everything's going well for her. And then when she's pregnant, she can no longer be in the choir. She can no longer be at the regular high school. She goes to a school for teen moms, which turns out to be a good thing for her, but it's not what she thought she was going to be doing. And with some help from people who love her, the people at the Teen Moms program and others, she figures out how she can get on with her life and at the same time take care of her baby. And she's, she becomes a strong person and a happy person. She's happy with her life. And I neglected to say this, but the characters stay with me. It's like I've been best friends with a character for a year, and then I send them off into the world. But sometimes I just wonder, well, what's Jeff up to now? And so I'd been wondering that about Emmy, and Emmy turns up in a couple of books, just briefly. She's now a librarian at a high school, and so she's able to help kids now and then who are needing some help, or offer them a place that it's a meeting place for a gay, lesbian, straight alliance in one of the books. But she has shown up again in Eddie's Choice, and Rosie, Emmy's daughter, and Eddie are girlfriend, boyfriend. Now that's nothing anybody needs to know. A few people who follow the books very closely will pick up on that. But it was fun for me because, I was happy to see Emmy as a 40-year-old, or I guess 36-year-old. I've done some work with a local organization, 916, which is our area code, 916 Inc., capital INK, and it's a writing program to help increase youth literacy through creative writing. And so I've been working with them for probably maybe 6 years. And it's a great program. At the end of each 12-week program, kids turn in their favorite pieces of writing, 3 or 4 pieces. And then in another 6 weeks or so, a professionally designed and produced book comes out, and they have a book release party, and they become published authors. So I enjoy that. I'm not doing that right now, but probably will next semester. And so that's, depending on the time, it's 1 or 2 days a week, and I get to work with kids who are kind of down and out. Most of my work has been at the youth detention facility, and I enjoy that. And it's great to see them light up when someone respects their writing. The major difference, I think, is social media, and that so much is available online. I think they use that for their homework, and they use it to keep in contact with friends all over. And sometimes they use it to show off, and sometimes it's used for bullying or criticizing. And that's very different. And in writing Eddie's Choice, I realized, I knew it was the last young adult that I was going to write anyway, but I realized that if I were to write another YA book, I would probably have to present it as historical fiction, because I don't know the interactions with social media and people on social media in the way that I need to totally understand the environment of kids who are in high school right now. And I took part of a draft into high school here in Sacramento. I know the teacher, and she allowed me to come in. And I read part of a chapter to a group, and it's where Eddie has painted over some racist graffiti at his school, and I have Monday morning when he goes into school, I have a friend. He's not online. He's not on social media a lot, and he goes into school, and his friend shows him all of this terrible stuff that's been written about him. And they said, Monday? And this happened on Friday? And I said, yes. They said, that would be all over the social media, or whatever they're calling various things, by lunchtime. It happened in the morning by lunchtime. And so I really appreciated that because I changed it and I sent it through again and got it. I think got it right. They thought it was right, but those are the kinds of pitfalls that I have. The emotions are the same. You know, kids are wanting to find love. They're worried about school. Some of them have difficult homes, um, and so much is the same, and probably will remain a lot the same until the end of time. Um, but the out that's at the core. But the outer situations are very different given how we are able to have constant contact and show our whole lives on Instagram. And I understand that Facebook is kind of out of it, except for teams, ways to keep in touch with teams and maybe with teachers. But mostly it's not kid to kid. I think the trick is to see every rejection as well, it was an act of courage, and they sent it out. And sometimes with rejections, a writer will get a note, and it's good to pay attention to that. Many writers now, the publishing business is very, very different than when I sent Telling out 23 times. And a lot of writers get tired of the process and self-publish. And the world is full of self-published books now, and some of them are really good, and a lot of them are terrible. I think it's good if you've got a professional publisher, they're going to do a better product. And even though you'll get 10% on sales with a professional publisher, around 10%, and you'll get all of the sales from a self-published book, the sales on a self-published book are going to be, in most cases, very, very low. And the writer has to do all of the marketing themselves and set up the whole format. And it's a very different process, publishing, than writing. Writers hear this all the time, but write and keep writing. But get the editor out of your head. People get totally hung up on how does this sound? Is anybody going to want to read it? I need to change, the spelling, the grammar. Just write however it comes, and write as fast as you can. And know that it's first draft. And maybe read Bird by Anne Lamott, who says we all have to be willing to write a shitty first draft. Everybody does. And so I think getting, if people can get to the playful side of their mind, or at least the non-judgmental part of their mind, then the writing is a lot more fun and it flows more freely. I heard this on a TED Talk. I'm not going to get any of the details right, so you can look it up. It's under creativity. But neurologists studying creativity managed to put jazz musicians into MRIs, and they had a keyboard hooked up, and the jazz musicians were told to improvise. First, they were told to play a piece of music that was already decided, and then they were told to improvise. And when they played the piece of music that was already decided for them, the part of their brain that is logical and that tells people how to behave and get along, and that super important part of the brain, the executive function, was all lit up. But when they were improvising, that part went quiet. And another part of the brain, which they think has a lot to do with creativity, became very, very active. And so for me, I need to get past the logical part of my brain and just write. And then I do a lot of rewriting. There's a time to invite the editor in and the criticizer in, but it's way down the line. I love doing school visits and library visits. I I have one. I have a couple of them set up in Southern California, but one that I'm certainly eagerly anticipating is at a large comprehensive high school, Lakewood High School, which is part of the Long Beach School District. And one of the things, the reason I started writing really this series is trying to get kids to read. That was my purpose. And then just one thing led to another. And so I love being able to tell kids in a way that I think maybe they haven't heard before of the importance of reading for fun and developing a reading for pleasure habit. It will change their lives. And I've got a few, some time back, quite a while ago, the Los Angeles Times reported on a research study that showed that the single most important aspect indicating success in a person's life was whether or not they read for pleasure. And it didn't matter what they read, comic books, history textbooks, novels, romances. It didn't matter. It was the fact of reading for pleasure. And that's the easiest way to develop our vocabulary and our writing skills. So I always want to emphasize that. And I also want to emphasize that ordinary people are writers. And every single person has their own unique story to tell. And no one can tell their story the way they can, whether it's a story that's made up or whether it's a story from their life. It's their own unique story. And the more we understand of each other's unique stories, the better off we are. So I like to do those two things. And then I love to just tell them a little bit about my books. And they're always interested. Dietrich Remy was on the top 10 banned books list in, I don't know when it was, 97 or something, long time ago. But they love hearing about that. And I love talking to them about that. That grandmother had every right, if the girl's parents agreed, had every right to keep that girl from reading Dietrich Remy, but she didn't have a right to keep everybody else in the school from reading Dietrich Remy. That's why we have free speech in the Constitution. So I like that, and I love the questions, and it always turns out to be lively. So that's fun. The reason it's been 10 years between Hamilton High books is that my husband was diagnosed with frontal temporal dementia in 2009. He'd actually been showing he'd been having a lot of strange behavior before that. And as a caregiver, I was just totally caught up in dealing with his situation. And so I did write a book about that, Till Death or Dementia Do Us Part, but it kept me from writing anything about teens at that time. I'm very happy that the book is out in the world. A number of people have said it's been helpful to them, even though it's certainly not an easy read, and it was definitely not an easy write. Usually it takes me 9 months to write a book. It's kind of like having a baby. Starts with a little seed, and then it becomes more complicated, and then there's a painful labor, and it's out in the world. But this one took over 2 years, and I just had to stop and start. I couldn't stay with it totally consistently, but it's done, and I'm happy about that.